Today on Empowering Workplaces, we are going to be talking about how to invest your time for greater joy and fulfillment with Cassie Holmes, who is a professor at UCLA's Anderson School of Management and author of the best-selling book, Happier Hour: How to Beat Distraction, Expand Your Time, and Focus on What Matters Most. This is going to be a really good one, folks. Welcome to Empowering Workplaces, a show for everyone who wants to make work better and more fulfilling. We are your hosts, culture designer Maddie Grant and organizational psychologist Sonia Lucina. Join us in today's awesome conversation.
Cassie, it is such a pleasure to have you on with us. I am a huge fan of your work, a huge fan of your research, and Happier Hour was one of those books that I couldn't put down when I started reading it. And I've read, I think, probably hundreds of books being a PhD. And it was one of those that I looked at the first page and I thought, wow, I wish I would have written this. Even from the beginning, the story you shared about your life and how you connect with your readers, and then all the research that followed that was just chock full of good advice. I can't say enough amazing things about it. So such a pleasure to have you on with us today. Do you mind telling us just a little bit more about yourself and then telling us, what inspired you to write this book?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me, Sonia and Maddie. It's a treat to spend this time with you. And yeah, I guess as an introduction to myself, as mentioned, I am a professor at UCLA's Anderson School of Management, and I research happiness, and now I teach happiness, which is
the coolest thing ever.
It's so fun. But also, when I came to the department 5 years ago, so throughout my career, my PhD was actually in marketing at a business school. My first job, I was at Wharton as a marketing faculty member. And throughout, I have been researching happiness, but I have been in the sort of business context, focusing on the sort of marketing implications and teaching traditional marketing classes. And then about 5 years ago, I was like, enough is enough. I want to teach what I know about and what I love. So I go to the administration, and I'm like, I want to teach a course on happiness. And they're like, what? This is a business school. And then I brought them the data, which I know that you guys are well aware of, that from, understanding emotional well-being among the team, happy employees are better performers, they stick around longer. From an interpersonal relationship, happy people are nicer, better to those around them. And then there's all these health ramifications. So I gave them the data and they're like, fine. And now it's the most popular elective at the school, and not that I would ever have wanted it, but the pandemic highlighted to all of us, no longer is there a question of the role of happiness and well-being in the workplace. It is in such demand and needing to understand that everyone is recognizing that these are really important and crucial questions. And I feel grateful that I had been studying it sort of throughout, so that at this point, when people are really asking these big questions, both personally, like what do I do with my life, but as well as organizationally, I have some answers. And so I guess also related to who I am, and which like sort of will propel us into the story of why I wrote the book, which was the opening page, which Sonia could have written herself, I'm sure, is that I'm also a mom. I am. I have 2 young kids. I have a husband whom I love very much. I have friends who I, need to invest time in. And I have work that I love. And so as a researcher of time and happiness, I think it's important to recognize that probably what motivated that is that my relationship with time started off as not very happy at all. In fact, I felt that for my own happiness, time seemed to be the biggest barrier. And I shared in the opening of the book this sort of day, which it was like, there's so many days like this. This is just one that I remember quite vividly, where I was still an assistant professor at Wharton, living in Philly, and I had traveled up to New York to give a talk in New York, and my presentation was sandwiched between back-to-back meetings. So I'm like rushing from meetings to my presentation, then to more meetings, and then this networking dinner, and then rushing like a crazy lady to the train station to catch the very last train that would get me home to my 4-month-old. And who were asleep in Philly. And I did make the train, but I remember just sort of sinking into my seat, so exhausted. And as I was like looking at the night lights sort of whiz by, I was like, I don't know if I can keep up, right? Between the pressures of work, wanting to be a good parent, wanting to be a good partner, a good friend, the never-ending pile of chores. There were not enough hours in the day to get it all done, let alone to do any of it well, let alone to enjoy any of it along the way. And I wanted more time, not just so that I could get more done. I wanted more time so that I could slow down and actually experience the life that was sort of passing by. And it was that feeling of time poverty, which I've now gone to and currently researching more. It was that feeling that made me realize that I needed to study this, to figure out how do we invest the hours of our days so that we feel greater joy in our lives.
We're vigorously nodding over here, of course, because we can 100% resonate with that feeling of just being so tired and just trying to do so much. And Sonia, I know you have thoughts.
Well, and I think that's why your research and your personal story resonated so much with me, because I think it's something that I still in some ways experience all the time. And I've gone through my priority setting, and I moved to Argentina for love. I didn't move to Argentina for some big career opportunity. And that's after I got my PhD and after I got my MBA and after my career, in my late 20s, early 30s was skyrocketing. You don't move to a country where you don't speak the language and you don't know anyone except for the person you're in love with to catapult your career. So I've made some significant life decisions because of some of those priorities. But I even, like last week, I found myself towards the end of the week just sitting at the kitchen table, like just exhausted, and actually thinking about, your research and your book and the time management, saying, my gosh, like I know better, but I still catch myself in these moments where I know I can do better. And sometimes like the days just get away from me, and I think about these priorities and I have a 5-year-old son, and I'm like, he's my world. I want to have all that energy for him. And so I think it's a little bit of that setting and resetting. And I think to your point, understanding and prioritizing what you value most to create space for that. But then it's almost this ongoing exercise. It's not like I've got it, check, like move on. It's like I'm doing okay. And then doing some self-reflection when all of a sudden maybe things don't seem as okay, and you get that stress back. So I'd love to know, you did a lot of research for your book. What were maybe a couple of things that were particularly surprising to you when it came to, people prioritizing or thinking about that, or how challenging that is, or just, yeah. I know sometimes we do research and we confirm our hypotheses and we're like, okay, I thought that. And other times like, wait a minute, no way. I would have never expected this. Like, what were a couple of those moments where you felt like maybe the answer is not quite where you thought it would be?
Totally. And first I will say that absolutely, it's an ongoing practice, even for me, that I'm like doing the research and coming up with these insights. I still sort of find myself like having to be like, oh, wait,
Yeah.
get back on track, like become more intentional, more proactive, not just reactive. But we can get to that later. So some surprising findings that I think are so important for us to recognize because, as you said, you were nodding when I was describing that sense of time poverty. We are not alone. I mean, my team, we conducted a national poll that showed that nearly half of Americans feel this way. Moms tend to feel more time poor than dads. Working parents, particularly when your partner is working, tend to feel particularly impoverished. But we saw in our data that actually all types of people are prone to this, like including those who don't have kids, including those who don't work for pay. So it's really important as something to be aware of and to address. And something that was surprising in my sort of state of time poverty in that night, and I remember so vividly being like, you know what? I think the solution to this is to quit everything and move to like a sunny island somewhere where I could spend all the hours of my days doing, relaxing, doing exactly what I wanted. Because surely, if I had a whole lot more time, then I would be happier, right? But I was like, before I walk into my boss's office and quit and like tell my husband we're like packing for life at the beach, I wondered, is it true? Is it true that people who have a whole lot more time are in fact happier? And this is an empirical question and one that I could test and did. And so what we did was we looked at what's the relationship between the amount of discretionary time people have and their happiness. And we ran several studies, including in one of the studies, we analyzed data from the American Time Use Survey that looks at for tens of thousands of working as well as non-working Americans, how they spend a regular day. And from that, we could calculate how much time they spend on discretionary activities, like the relaxing, the socializing, the also the fun, like the sort of productive discretionary, like working out. And we related that to their happiness. And the pattern of results that we found was consistent and interesting. And what it was an upside down U shape, like an arc or a rainbow. And this is interesting because what it shows is that happiness goes down on both ends of the spectrum. Now, having too little time and seeing that was associated with unhappiness was not surprising. That was because that's what, with that heightened feeling of stress that we feel, that's what leads to less happiness when we feel time poor. But it was that other side that was super interesting. We found in our data that those with more than approximately 5 hours of discretionary time in the day were also less happy. And what this is showing is that there's such thing as having too much available time. And the question is why? And digging into it, what it turns out is that we are driven to be somewhat productive, at least a little productive. That is, research shows that we are averse to being idle. And so when we spend all the hours of our days, day in and day out, this isn't vacation, this isn't the weekend, but in the regular sort of cadence of our lives, and so we spend our hours and have nothing to show for it, it undermines our sense of productivity, it undermines our sense of purpose. And from that, we feel less satisfied. So I think this is really important to hold in our heads, in those crazy days. The answer is not to quit everything, right? But also, I think that is something that's so interesting and important in this, is that the answer for happiness isn't about having a whole lot more time. It's really how we spend the time that we have, because even you see in the data that there's a pretty wide swath between 2 and 5 hours of discretionary time in the day where the relationship is flat. Like there's no relationship between how much time you have available and how happy you are. And also there's a lot of noise in the data. So this is pointing to that it's not about having more time. It's about how we invest the time that we have for greater happiness. And from that, there's sort of two components of the answer. It is we spend and prioritize time for those activities that are most worthwhile. And we can talk about how you identify those for you. But also, when you're spending your time on those activities, it's paying attention. And so it's about intentionality and attention. And so that sort of second piece goes to my number 2 of something that I've found just sort of so surprising and so important to recognize in the research. And that is that there is extraordinary happiness available to us in ordinary moments. And so often because we're in a rush, we pass by them without noticing. Or we don't make time for them because they're so ordinary. We're like, oh, I can do that tomorrow, or I can do that next week. That we don't make time for them. Or even, if we're doing them, our mind is somewhere else, or we're like looking at our phone, sort of thinking about all the other things we should be doing. And I can unpack that a little bit more, but just recognizing that it's not about having more time for greater happiness. And actually, it doesn't require spending a whole lot of time on those things that make us happy to really sort of find the joy within them. So it's not about quantity, it's about quality.
Oh, I love that. And I'm smiling so big because that's something I try to do, and with my friends and with my family. And I was just even thinking last weekend, we're still rushing around, even trying to be mindful and purposeful. Like a lot of times, like we find ourselves, oh, we need to do one thing or another. And it was a rainy Saturday, and my husband's son and I were sitting on the couch with this big blanket because it's, now just spring. It was winter in Argentina just, a few days ago. And I looked at them and I said, I love you guys so much. Like, this is so wonderful. Like a moment to just slow down and be together and just enjoy. And it's funny because now I've known my husband for nearly a decade. So he's used to me like having, those moments of just taking it in. But you're right. And there is just so much beauty. Like when your kid learns how to do something, or even like when you get a really good cup of coffee, or when you go and it's really good dessert, it's those moments. And I do hope for those who are listening to you and listening to this show that it is something, I think, that it doesn't cost us that much. It's just that intentionality. And it's something we can insert into our days to feel that gratitude and to feel that, like, stopping and actually enjoying the little things, because they're just so incredible. And one of the things that you talk about in the book too is also creating moments of joy. And for me, I've been doing a little bit of soul searching in some of the last months. Again, I always joke that there's so many things I want to do in life. And you started telling us about yourself that you want, to be a great professor and really great at your career, and a great mother and a friend and a spouse and all those different things. And it's hard doing all of that at once. And I was just having this conversation with Martine the other day. I'm like, there are just so many things I want to do that I feel like would be so amazing, and I just can't find the time. And he was kind of he's an oil and gas. He's like not a psychologist, not a researcher. And he was, just like empathetically listening to me, but with this look on his face. And I was like, yeah, no, I know it's a good problem to have, but it still feels a little bit frustrating on your time, because you want to do, like, if I could just create a little bit more, if I could prioritize just a little bit better, but I feel like I'm prioritizing. And so in all of that, I, again, was thinking back to the research in your book, and again, creating these moments of joy, and creating, whether it's something really big or just celebrating different things that happen. What's some of your advice for how somebody would go about doing that? That maybe it's not perfectly natural to them, but they're listening to our conversation. They're like, I want in. I want these moments. What do I do?
Yeah. Well, one strategy is to turn routine into ritual. So the thing that happens is, we do get used to things, and because of hedonic adaptation. So this is our psychological propensity to get used to things over time. When you do the same thing again and again, when you're with the same person over and over, they stop having as intense of an effect on you emotionally. And so it's good that we are adaptive, right, in the face of negative circumstances. But it's bad that we adapt in the face of these joys, if like there are these things that we like. An example that I share, and every time I say it, I feel like badly, but it's like, think back to the very first time that your partner said, I love you, right? And it's like fireworks in your heart, in your mind. And then in just a few years, those words get shortened to love you as you're hanging up the phone or walking out the door. And as something as wonderful and profound as the declaration of love gets shortened to words that you don't even hear, but they're just words that are said and sort of pass by. It shows the importance of recognizing that hedonic adaptation happens, and how do we offset it for these moments that, once brought joy and could potentially bring joy. And turning routine into ritual is one way to do that. So routines are so useful because it allows us to do things mindlessly, right? We don't have to put so much thought into it. But without that, mindfulness, then, you are moving through it. But if you turn it into a ritual, then it makes it more special. So an example that continues to be so impactful for me is my weekly coffee date with my daughter, Lita. And so this started when Lita was really little. On my way to drop her off at her preschool on Thursday mornings at her preschool, before me going into the office, I wanted caffeine, right? Obviously. So we would stop at the local coffee shop, and we turned this routine into a ritual. We gave it a name. So it's our Thursday morning coffee dates. We have our coffee date playlist that we play, with the songs. She gets her hot chocolate. I get my flat white. We munch on croissants, and it's 30 minutes that it's just the two of us. And this is our thing. And by giving it a name, we've made it special. We anticipate this time, throughout the week. It's only 30 minutes, but it has a big impact on how I feel outside of those 30 minutes. Like, we look forward to this time. We reflect back on and remember this time as this thing that we do. And even when I'm like thinking about like my satisfaction in life overall, this is something that I totally pull to, because it's that my relationship and connection with my daughter that absolutely, gets solidified and celebrated in this weekly date. And now she's in elementary school, so it starts too early to go on Thursday morning. So our Thursday morning coffee date, which we still call it that, happens on the weekend. And that just giving it a name is really important. There's research that shows that couples who have shared rituals within their relationship report greater relationship satisfaction. Families who have shared holiday traditions are more likely to gather for the holidays and enjoy the holidays more. And it doesn't have to be religious. It's just like, what are those things that we do that you can anticipate, look forward to, reflect back on, and that connect you to each other? And just giving it a name instead of going out to dinner, it's your dinner date, or your morning coffee, even if it isn't shared with someone. It's like, instead of the routine that you're moving through, it's like your ritual that you sort of carve out that space. It's just a mental shift, but it can be really powerful.
I will say for me, because I work with my partner, we actually pay very close attention to this, because we have to have a personal relationship as well as a work relationship, right? Otherwise, it's just all work all the time.
Totally.
So I have kids too, although one is in college and the other one's about to go next year. So but I love all of that. Yeah.
Another thing I was going to say is to offset hedonic adaptation is to recognize like how limited your times left are. Just because it's sort of a quote unquote everyday activity, it doesn't mean it's going to continue happening every day, and certainly not like it does now. And so I walk through this exercise in Happier Hour of like counting times left. And so like, even for instance, with my coffee date with my daughter, Lita, first step is like, how many times have you done it together in the past? So I counted of my weekly coffee dates since she was little. During my maternity leave, it was like every day I'd bundle her up and like we, get out to the coffee shop as my source of sanity. So I calculated that we've gone on about 400 coffee dates together so far. And then the next step is calculating how many times will you likely do this in the future in the way that you're doing it now. Because circumstances change, right? And so Lita is now 8. When she's 12, she's probably going to want to go to the coffee shop with her friends instead of me. And then she's going to go up to college, and then live in New York if she's like anything like I was. So I calculated we have about 230 coffee dates together left. And then the last step is calculate of your total times what percentage you have left. I realized that Lita and I have 36% of our coffee dates left. And she's only 8 years old, right?
Wow.
And so what that does is it absolutely makes you pay attention. It makes you prioritize, even in those busy weeks. It's like, oh no, like we are going to do our coffee dates, that is this time, make the time. But as importantly, when we're spending that time, knowing that they're limited, right? It totally affects how I engage during that time. My phone is away, out of sight, is closer to out of mind. But also, that to-do list that's like constantly running in our minds of like we're planning for, thinking about what's next. That pulls us out of what we're doing. But this is the time that matters. This is, one of those activities that I don't want to miss out on. And so it also recognizing the limited sort of nature of it makes you pay attention. So again, it's that intentionality, making the time, and attention when you spend the time.
Yeah, no, and that really resonates with me too. So when I was reading your book, I was thinking about that, and I was thinking about it in all different contexts, like my parents, my friends, my son, and it does really make you think about the quality of that time. And what I was going to ask you that we kind of started to touch on a little bit earlier. So I try to do a really good job of following quote unquote traditional work hours, meaning that I'll sit down at my computer at 9 and I'll shut it down at 6. And during that time, I'm working like a wild person. Like I'm between meet and like just, opportunity to improve hugely during those hours and my multitasking, everything. But I really try to shut down after because, again, I chose to have a family. And if I chose to have a family, I want to be present for them. And there are days that I do so well, like the phone's away. I don't even think about it. I don't look at it. And then there are days that I'm like, Mateo, just give me 1 second. Just give me 1 second. No, mommy, let's do a puzzle. Yeah, but okay, just 1 second. And I get so frustrated because I know better, but I'm going into these like old habits or just not staying true to what I believe is most important to me. And that's that this is the time with my family. Work has its time and it's, concentration and focus. And now it's time to reshift. What's some of your advice, like when we know better, but we default? like how do we like reset? How do we, and I know like I think about it in the evenings, but then I wish I could tell you, it's like, oh, it's just a one-off. It happens once a year and I snap right back. Like, no, it's like a roller coaster sometimes.
Yeah. And first off, I would say is like, don't be so hard on yourself. Like or despite the greatest intentions and paying a lot of attention, of course, there's going to be some cases and days that we do sort of slip up. One thing actually, and this is related to current work that we're doing that I think is really helpful is taking this, and I mention it in the book, is like taking a broader perspective of time. Thinking about our, time not hour by hour, but really by the week, by the month, by the year, by the years. And what we find in our work is that those who take a broader view of their time, thinking in terms of years in their life overall versus hour by hour, report significantly greater positive mood during their days, as well as greater sense of meaning and satisfaction in their lives overall. And what I think I think that that's driven by a few things. One is by zooming out and taking this broader perspective. It doesn't put so much pressure on every single hour that you see that our hours are like, I like thinking about it as sort of a mosaic, right? And the tiles are ours. And then you place all those tiles together to create this like beautiful, colorful, rich, complex image that is your entire life. And I think that that helps because it doesn't force these trade-offs. Like so often, like as we're thinking hour by hour, how you're spending your time in that hour seems like such an all or nothing decision and reflection of who you are. It's like, oh my God, I must be the worst parent because in this hour I am working as opposed to in line to pick up my kid from school, right? But if you place those tiles next to each other within your week, you see like, oh, actually, these are these tiles that I am totally with my family. These are the tiles that I'm like totally with, doing my work.
Yeah.
These are the tiles that I'm with my friends. And so it allows you not to sort of, it takes the pressure off of any hour to be this end all be all of who you are, like, and it helps remove the guilt and sort of lessen the sense of conflict. But also and another nice thing that it does is by taking this broader perspective of time, it leads us to think more about our values, like those higher order things that matter. And we even see this. So like in the data, we, there's some of those activities that are urgent, some that are important, and there's also overlap, some that are urgent and important, some that are urgent, not important. And then there's also some of these that are important, but not urgent. And those are the ones like the time with our kids, for instance, or dinner with your spouse, that they are important, but they don't feel the urgency of these sort of like incoming requests and tasks. So it's very easy to not spend time on them. What we found was that those who took a broader perspective of their time were more likely to spend time on their tasks that were important, irrespective of the urgency. So it wasn't urgency that was driving where they spent their time. It was importance. And then sometimes urgent tasks would come into play. So for both of those reasons, I think that take this broader perspective of time. Think about your week when you're scheduling, it's not this next hour. It's like, how do all those hours sort of go together? And like in the second to last chapter of the book, I talk about time crafting, like based off of all the strategies and insights that you gained over the course of the book, how do you actually piece it together to design an ideal week? And it's not just which activities, but how do you actually sequence them so that the good ones have the biggest impact, the less fun ones have less of an effect on your experience more broadly. And then sort of, laddering up even more like further is like thinking like, oh, what is this sort of next chapter of my life, next 5 years? And then what is like life overall? Like, what are those things that ultimately matter? Because those ladder back, with the times left exercise, for instance, it ladders back to influence how you spend your hours by thinking about your years.
Thank you for that. And I remember reading that in the book, but I wrote it down and I'm pretty sure I'm going to make a sign and put it on my desk because as you could tell, as I was talking, like that is, for me, it's not something I've internalized yet, but as soon as you said it, like I felt like 1,000,000 pounds just lift off my shoulders because I thought you're right. Like none of us can show up every minute and every hour of the day with the full intention of what we want. And a big part of that is just giving ourselves grace when we don't, and taking that step back. And then as you were talking, I was like, my goodness, like a lot of times I think about a weekend, like how good of a parent was I this weekend? Did I take Mateo to the swings and the slides? Did we go do different, like, and that's still really narrow. It's not an hour, but maybe not every weekend is going to be, all activities are all focused on kids. So I think that is just such a brilliant reminder. And I think that will help people a lot, because it's important for us to remember what things are important to us and how we want to generally live our schedules. But I do, at least I can speak from personal experience, like when I put so much pressure on myself to live up to everything hour in and hour out, sometimes you just can't, because to your point, like there are just some urgent things that sometimes will need to get done. And there's some bigger important things, but maybe this one thing we need to get done, and we shouldn't beat ourselves up over the next year because that one day or that 1 hour wasn't perfect. So thank you. I think it's a really good way for people to think. And I think it's a way that maybe is not natural for everyone yet. So that way it's like one of those reminders until you internalize it. So I know we don't have that much time left, and I just wanted to ask you as a last question. I never want this episode to end. So again, you just had so much research in your book, and I loved the balance between the research, the practical advice, and then the personal stories. Like I felt like when I was reading the book, I was like, oh, I know you. I feel like maybe we went to college together. What's next? Like, what's your, big project, or what are you researching that you can share with our listeners?
Yeah, currently we're really digging into this time poverty experience, and trying to, because it is so limiting in terms of how we experience our lives, and it is so prevalent. And what we're trying to do is figure out what are the sources of it, because it is subjective. It is a feeling of how much time you have and how much you have to do within that time. And so we really want to sort of really unpack the psychology of it so that we can help people feel more time affluent. So that's one thing. The other is sort of unpacking this, which I just told you guys about, this broader perspective of time, of like, how do we get ourselves into that mindset, and also continue to unpack how it benefits us. So I already touched on some of the things, but it's the more answer, or like things that we answer, then like the more questions. It's such a rich area. And so
and just thinking about it from, the company or organizational perspective, like I can totally see how this whole story around, returning to the office and people's reluctance is because they're naturally thinking, is it worth my 45-minute commute, each way to go sit, on Zoom in the office, when I could actually be using that time in a much more, intentional way at home. So I feel like this is happening naturally, and this work that you're doing could really help organizations clarify why it is that it's important to be back in the office. Like, because that's a question, it's not a given, but there are good reasons to be with other people at work, right? Which is a whole nother rabbit hole topic. But I just feel like this conversation has so much, insight into that. And I can't wait to hear more about it all.
Yeah. And to your point, yes. These insights, and I unpack a lot in sort of one of the chapters of the book where I talk about happiness at work, of like, what are the features that make it, like, and sadly, if you look at the data on average, like people's least happy hours are work hours.
Yeah.
But it's not all hours. And so how do you pull out the pieces that are actually really rewarding and fulfilling? And then, but people have, since the pandemic, become much more intentional and thoughtful about how they spend their time. So they are much more reluctant to waste their time. And commuting is another activity that people do not like to do. Exercise is something that they've incorporated into the schedules they don't want to give up. But the thing that has gotten lost is the social connection that comes from being on our teams and and those are the things that you see this lack of engagement and also a really increased sense of isolation and anxiety, which I think losing on those relationships has perpetuated. So I think that a lot of these insights could actually not only help individuals design their own week to be optimal, but actually could help organizations design their weeks and their policies so that you get the best of everything, so that people can protect the time for the stuff that matters to them. Also make sure that they're really intentional to get the benefits of being together in a space with other people that you're working with. So yes, I think there's a lot of potential application.
Cassie, I can't thank you enough for your time today and for sharing all of, again, the research, the insights. For anyone who has not read your book, where's the best place for them to find it? If they'd like to either get in touch with you or follow more of your work, what's the best way for them to find you? Any information you want to share?
Yeah, so the book is available most everywhere. Happier Hour. And I am on LinkedIn, Cassie M. Holmes, and my website, CassieMHolmes.com. And those are the places that you can find me. But the thing that I love so much, and Sonia, having read the book, is that you can find me in the pages of the book because I'm very present. And hopefully that's the source of, even driving around town. You can even hang out with me because I narrate the audio. But anyway, hopefully that will allow you to gain the insights from the research.
Well, thank you so much again. Thank you for our listeners for joining us. And Cassie will continue to follow you and your research, and you're welcome back anytime that there is more you want to share. Thank you so much again.
Thank you so much for having me. This was fun.
In addition to being the Empowering Workplaces host, I'm also the president of Question Pro Workforce, and I wanted to tell you a bit more about it because it so brilliantly aligns with our concept of empowerment. At Question Pro Workforce, we help organizations across the world better connect with their employees. We do this through continuous listening survey technology, as well as sharing our deep knowledge and expertise to help our clients know what questions to ask to most deeply connect with their workforce and take impactful action on data and insights they collect. Learn how Question Pro Workforce can be a great partner on your path to creating a really outstanding employee listening strategy and a remarkable organizational culture at questionpro.com/workforce.